I bought the piano on a whim. I'd been passing by this dusty, rundown shop on the edge of town for months, and every time I looked through the window I'd see the same old upright piano sitting there, wedged between a coat rack full of moth-eaten hats and a cracked mirror. I'm not one for impulse buys, but there was something about that piano. Maybe it was the way the light hit it just right, casting long shadows on the wooden floor. Or maybe it was just the damn price, $50, a steal really. The old guy who ran the shop, Mr. Hodgins, practically wheezed with excitement when I handed him the cash. "Been sitting here longer than I can remember," he said, hacking up something wet into a handkerchief. "Belonged to some old dame who played for the church back in the day. She passed and her kids just wanted to get rid of it. No one's been interested in it. Till now." He gave me a toothy grin that looked more like a grimace and threw in delivery for free. Within an hour, the piano was in my tiny apartment, standing against the far wall like it had always been there. I ran my fingers over the yellowing keys, feeling the grit and dust caked between them. I'd have to clean it up, maybe even get it tuned, but it felt right, like it belonged to me. It wasn't until the next day that I found the sheet music. I'd spent the morning cleaning the piano, rubbing the wood down with polish, dusting off the keys, and doing my best to tune it by ear. I'm no concert pianist, but I know my way around an instrument. I write songs for a living. Well, try to anyway. The kind of stuff you hear in coffee shops and dive bars where the crowd is more interested in their drinks than the music. It's a modest gig, but it pays the bills. As I was cleaning out the space underneath the keys, my hand brushed against something stiff and brittle. I pulled it out, and there it was, an old sheet of music, yellowed and curling at the edges like it had been waiting there for years. The notes were handwritten in a spidery script, looping and twisting in ways that seemed almost unnatural, like the notes were trying to crawl off the page. At the top, in faded ink, was a title, Requiem for the Lost. I felt a chill creep up my spine as I read it. I couldn't help but wonder who had written it and why it had been left behind. Maybe it was a forgotten piece, never played, or maybe it was the kind of thing that was meant to be lost to time. Either way, I was curious. I placed the sheet music on the stand, cracked my knuckles, and began to play. The first notes came out soft and haunting, like a whisper carried on a breeze. The melody was slow and mournful, winding through minor keys like a funeral dirge. My fingers moved on their own, finding the notes with an ease that surprised me. It felt like the music was guiding me, pulling me deeper into its melancholy embrace. And then, just as I hit the crescendo, I felt it. Eyes. An icy tingle ran down my neck, and I glanced up, expecting to see a neighbor peeking in through my window. But there was no one there. Just the empty room, the dim light filtering through the blinds, and the shadows stretching long and thin across the floor. I shook it off, chalked it up to nerves, and kept playing. But the feeling didn't go away. If anything, it got worse. It was like a pressure building in the room, a sense of being watched by something unseen. I could feel it behind me, above me, around me, 100 invisible eyes all fixed on me with a cold, unblinking stare. When I finally finished the piece, the room felt like it was holding its breath. I sat there for a moment, hands trembling over the keys, heart pounding in my chest, and then, just as quickly as it came, the feeling was gone. I laughed it off, trying to convince myself it was just my imagination. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. I didn't know it then, but that was only the beginning. Over the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about the music. I'd play it over and over again, each time feeling that same eerie sensation. The creeping cold, the prickling of my skin, the weight of 100 eyes bearing down on me, and each time it seemed to get stronger. The first time I saw them, I thought I was dreaming. It was late, probably 2 or 3 in the morning. I'd been playing the Requiem for hours, lost in the twisting melodies and haunting harmonies, when I glanced up and saw them. They were standing in the corner of my living room, just outside the circle of light cast by my lamp, a crowd of shadowy figures all watching me with hollow, empty eyes. I froze, my fingers stilling on the keys. My breath caught in my throat, and for a moment I couldn't move. The figures didn't move either. They just stood there, silent and still, their faces shrouded in darkness. I blinked and they were gone. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the piano, waiting for the figures to come back. But they didn't. Not then, anyway. By morning, I'd convinced myself it was just a trick of the light, a side effect of too much coffee and not enough sleep. But the more I played the Requiem, the harder it became to deny what was happening. The figures started appearing more often, first in the corners of my apartment, then in the mirrors, then in the windows. They were always there, lurking just out of sight, waiting for me to look away. And it wasn't just when I was playing. They started following me. I'd see them on the street, standing in doorways or under streetlights, their hollow eyes watching me as I passed. I'd catch glimpses of them in the reflections of shop windows or the polished chrome of parked cars, always watching, always waiting, and the more I played, the closer they got. I should have stopped. Any sane person would have. But there was something about the music, something I couldn't explain. It was like a drug, a pull I couldn't resist. I had to finish it. I had to know how it ended. One night, after another sleepless day of being haunted by those silent watchers, I sat down at the piano and resolved to play the Requiem from start to finish. I didn't care if it took all night. I didn't care if the figures came crawling out of the walls. I just needed to finish it. I needed to hear the last note. The room was dark except for the light of a single lamp casting long shadows across the floor. I took a deep breath, placed my fingers on the keys, and began to play. The music poured out of me like a river, my fingers dancing over the keys with a fervor I'd never felt before. The shadows in the room seemed to shift and writhe, moving in time with the music. I could feel the figures closing in, pressing closer and closer with each note. And then, just as I reached the climax, something happened. The notes on the page began to change. At first I thought it was a trick of my tired eyes, but no. The ink was moving, shifting, rearranging itself on the page. New notes appeared, twisting and curling like black tendrils, forming a new melody that I'd never seen before. I kept playing, unable to stop, my eyes glued to the shifting sheet music. The new melody was darker, more dissonant, like a scream trapped in a symphony. My hands ached from the intensity, my fingers moving faster and faster until they were a blur. The room grew colder, and I could see my breath fogging in the air. The figures were closer now, so close I could almost feel their breath on my skin. Their hollow eyes glowed with a pale, sickly light, their faces contorted in silent screams. I tried to stop, but my hands wouldn't listen. They moved on their own, playing the new melody with a frenzied desperation. I could feel something building, something dark and terrible, like a storm about to break. And then, just as I hit the final note, everything went black. I woke up on the floor, the taste of blood in my mouth. My hands were raw and bleeding, the keys of the piano stained with red. The sheet music was gone, vanished as if it had never been there. The room was cold, the air heavy with the scent of something rotten. And the figures were gone. All of them. For a moment I thought it was over, that whatever had been haunting me had finally left. But as I stood up and looked around, I realized it wasn't over. Not by a long shot, because they were still there. Not in the corners, not in the mirrors, but in my mind. I could feel them, like a weight pressing down on my skull, their hollow eyes staring out from the darkness of my thoughts. I could hear the Requiem, the new melody looping over and over in my head, louder and louder until it was all I could hear. I tried to leave, tried to run, but no matter where I went, they were always there. I'd see their faces in the crowd, hear their whispers in the wind. I tried to drown it out with other music, but nothing worked. The Requiem was all I could play, all I could think about. I've been trying to finish it for days now, but I can't. Every time I sit down at the piano, my hands freeze, my mind goes blank. The notes dance on the edge of my memory, just out of reach, taunting me. I don't know how much longer I can take it. The figures are getting closer again. I can feel them pressing in from all sides, suffocating me with their silence. I'm starting to see them even when I close my eyes. They're always watching, always waiting. I don't know what they want, but I know one thing: they won't let me go until I finish the Requiem. And I'm starting to think that maybe, just maybe, I don't want them to.